The neural implant in Vexara's skull hummed as the transmission completed, leaving behind an uncomfortable sensation at the base of her neck. She flexed her four-fingered hand, watching the iridescent scales along her forearm shift from deep purple to a more neutral blue. The dossier was sparse, unusually so for a mission of this classification. You've received the coordinates. The voice belonged to Commander Esley, her contact with the Galactic Mercenary Guild. Yes, Vexara replied, her double-lidded eyes narrowing. But the brief lacks specifics. What exactly am I extracting? The commander's holographic image flickered in the dim light of her ship's cockpit. That's classified at the highest level. All you need to know is that it's a biological component located within the human subject's body. Biological, Vexara's cranial ridges raised slightly, the equivalent of a human frown. I'm not a medical extraction specialist. Your skills are precisely why you were selected, Vexara. This requires delicacy. The subject must remain alive. The extraction point is sensitive. Something wasn't adding up. Vexara had built her reputation on clean, efficient operations, usually data theft or artifact recovery, not whatever this was. The fee reflects the operation's importance, Esley continued. Triple your usual rate plus diplomatic immunity within 3 star systems of your choosing. Now Vexara's interest was genuinely piqued, immunity in the Argus sector. If that's your wish. She hesitated. The Argus sector had been closed to her kind since the genetic wars a century ago, the same conflict that had led to their species-wide sterility crisis. Access to those systems could potentially mean access to pre-war genetic archives. What aren't you telling me, Esley? The commander's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of discomfort among their kind. This human carries genetic markers our scientists believe could reverse the sterility plague. His DNA contains sequences we thought lost forever. Vexara's scales shifted involuntarily to a deep crimson. The sterility plague had reduced her species' birth rate by 98.7%. Without intervention, extinction was inevitable within 3 generations. I'll need specialized equipment then, she said, calculating the risks. Everything awaits you at the detention facility. The human was captured near the ruins of Elysium colony. He's being held in isolation, unaware of his value. Vexara's ship entered the coordinates automatically, engines humming to life. Does he have a name? Designation, human subject K-137. His actual name, Esley. A pause, Kieran Walsh, former exploration specialist with the Earth Coalition. The journey to the facility took 3 standard days, during which Vexara reviewed what little information she had. Humans were resilient creatures, adaptable, clever, and notoriously difficult to predict. This one had survived alone on a hostile frontier world for months before capture. The detention facility orbited an unremarkable gas giant in neutral space, technically outside any jurisdiction that might object to holding a human against his will. As Vexara docked, she was met by a security detail led by a tall, gaunt official who introduced himself as Director Nix. We've waited anxiously for your arrival, he said, not bothering to hide his desperation. The extraction must proceed immediately. I decide the timeline, Vexara replied coldly. First, I need to assess the subject. Director Nix hesitated. Very well, but be warned, this human is difficult, manipulative. Don't engage in unnecessary conversation. The cell block was sterile and silent. Vexara felt the weight of her decision growing heavier with each step. Whatever genetic material they wanted, extracting it without consent violated at least 17 interstellar regulations. The cell door slid open, revealing a surprisingly comfortable chamber. The human Kieran sat cross-legged on a sleeping platform, his eyes closed in what appeared to be meditation. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps mid-30s by human standards, with dark hair and the muscled physique of someone accustomed to physically demanding work. I've told your other doctors, he said without opening his eyes, I'm not interested in your tests today. I'm not a doctor, Vexara replied, studying him carefully. My name is Vexara. I've been sent to extract something from you. Kieran's eyes opened then, startlingly intense and a shade of green uncommon among humans. He assessed her with a gaze that missed nothing. Well, he said with unexpected calm, at least you're honest about your intentions. That's new. Vexara found herself returning to Kieran's cell every day for the next week, ostensibly to build rapport before the extraction. In reality, she was stalling. Director Nix's impatience grew with each passing cycle. You've had sufficient time to gain the subject's trust, he hissed during their latest briefing. The Council demands progress. The human biology is complex, Vexara countered. Rush this and your precious genetic material could be compromised. In truth, her hesitation stemmed from something else entirely. Kieran Walsh was unlike any prisoner she had encountered, intelligent, perceptive, and strangely unafraid. When she entered his cell that day, he was sketching on a digital pad they'd provided, a concession to keep him compliant. The infamous extractor returns, Kieran said without looking up. Still haven't figured out where your treasure is hidden. Vexara's scales rippled involuntarily. You speak as though you know. I've pieced things together. He set aside the pad and fixed those unsettling green eyes on her. Your people took extensive samples, blood, tissue, cerebrospinal fluid, yet you're still here, which means whatever you want isn't something easily collected. His perception was troubling. Vexara maintained her professional distance, moving to the monitoring console beside his bed. Your continued cooperation is appreciated, she said mechanically. Kieran laughed, a sound she found oddly pleasant. We both know I'm not cooperating, I'm captive, there's a difference. Your situation could be considerably worse. True, he conceded. They could have sent someone who actually wants to hurt me. Instead, they sent you someone who's clearly struggling with her assignment. Vexara's head crest flattened in surprise. Was she so transparent to this human? I am a professional, she said stiffly. Professionals usually know what they're extracting. Kieran stood and approached, stopping just outside her personal space. For a captive, he moved with remarkable confidence. They haven't told you, have they? The accusation hung in the air. Vexara should have withdrawn, reported his insubordination. Instead, she found herself asking, what do you think they want? His expression softened slightly. After the tests, I accessed a terminal when a guard grew careless. Your species is facing extinction, sterility caused by genetic warfare, and apparently something in my DNA is valuable. Vexara's scales flashed crimson before she could control the reaction. If that were true, it would explain why all the medical scans focused on reproductive markers. Kieran's voice dropped lower. They don't want technology or information. They want my genetic material, specifically my reproductive potential. The truth hit Vexara like a physical blow. She had been sent to extract his reproductive material, to violate him in the most fundamental way. No wonder the briefing had been vague. No mercenary with a conscience would accept such a mission knowingly. I should report this conversation, she said, her voice barely audible. But you won't, Kieran replied with unexpected gentleness, because you're starting to see me as a person, not cargo. Their eyes locked, and something shifted between them. A moment of genuine connection that transcended their respective positions as captor and captive. The cell door slid open, breaking the moment. Director Nix stood in the doorway, flanked by medical personnel. Your time is up, extractor, he said coldly. The council has approved more direct methods will take over from here. Vexara's protective instincts flared unexpectedly. The subject remains under my jurisdiction until the extraction is complete. Your jurisdiction has been revoked, Nix replied, producing an official directive. Step aside. As the medical team entered with restraints, Kieran's eyes found hers, not pleading but somehow trusting. In that moment, Vexara made a decision that would alter both their futures irrevocably. Her hand moved to her sidearm. Stand down, Vexara ordered, her weapon now drawn and aimed steadily at Director Nix. The medical team froze, their expressions a mixture of shock and outrage. This is treason, Nix sputtered, his elongated features contorted with fury. The future of our entire species does not justify this method, Vexara finished. She backed toward Kieran, maintaining her aim. I'm invoking Article 7 of the Mercenary Code, Ethical Override. Nix's eyes narrowed to slits. There is no such article. There is for me. With practiced precision, Vexara activated the facility's emergency containment protocol from her neural implant, a backdoor she always installed before accepting assignments. The cell door slammed shut, sealing Nix and his team outside while locking her in with Kieran. That won't hold them long, she said, turning to him. Kieran's expression was unreadable. Why? I don't extract without consent, she replied, the half-truth easier than examining her true motivations. We have approximately 12 minutes before security overrides activate. For 3 days, they evaded capture within the labyrinthine facility. Vexara's knowledge of security systems and Kieran's surprising adaptability made them an effective team. They took refuge in an abandoned maintenance sector, converting an environmental control room into a temporary sanctuary. Your career as a mercenary is definitely over, Kieran observed as they shared synthetic rations. Impressive sacrifice for a stranger. Vexara's scales shifted to a contemplative blue-violet. Principles are meaningless until tested. Is that a mercenary philosophy? No, she admitted, something my progenitor taught me before the sterility plague claimed her. The mention of the plague hung between them. Kieran set aside his ration pack and moved closer to her. Tell me about it, he said softly. Help me understand what's at stake. Against her better judgment, Vexara found herself explaining the devastation, how the bioweapon had targeted their reproductive system, how birth rates had plummeted, how her people now faced a slow extinction measured in mere generations. Our scientists discovered that certain human genetic markers might provide resistance, she concluded. Your markers specifically. And this justifies abduction and forced extraction. No, she said firmly, but desperation rarely consults ethics. Their conversation was interrupted by an alert from her implant, security drones approaching. As they prepared to relocate, Kieran caught her arm, his touch sending an unexpected current through her scales. There could be another way, he said urgently, cooperation instead of coercion. Before she could respond, they were moving again, ducking through maintenance shafts and disabled security checkpoints. The pursuit was relentless, but each close call seemed to strengthen the bond forming between them. During a rare moment of safety, hidden in the cooling system of the station's reactor core, Kieran elaborated on his idea. Your people need genetic diversity, not just samples from one human, he explained. What if instead of this extraction we proposed an exchange program, voluntary genetic contributions from multiple humans, proper research collaboration? Vexara considered it, her tactical mind assessing possibilities. The Council would never agree to relinquish their advantage. They might if the alternative is getting nothing, Kieran countered. Right now I'm their only source and I'm about to disappear with you. The presumption that she would help him escape should have troubled her. Instead, Vexara found herself contemplating exactly that possibility. Something fundamental had changed within her, priorities shifting, loyalties realigning around this remarkable human and the principles he represented. We would need leverage, she murmured, plans already forming. We have it, Kieran said, his eyes intense in the dim blue light. Me. As facility alarms blared once more, they found themselves pressed close in their hiding place. The warmth of his body, so alien yet increasingly familiar, distracted Vexara from the danger surrounding them. Why help me, Kieran whispered, the real reason. Vexara's scales shifted to the rare pink hue of emotional vulnerability, a color she hadn't displayed since youth. Because you see me, she answered simply, not as a mercenary, not as an alien, as Vexara. His hand found hers in the darkness, fingers intertwining despite their different anatomies. And I see you, Kieran Walsh, she added, not as cargo to be extracted but as someone worth protecting. The station shuddered as the first explosions rocked the lower levels. Director Nix had apparently decided that if he couldn't have the genetic material, no one would, least of all a traitorous mercenary and her human accomplice. They've initiated the facility's self-destruct, Vexara announced, reading the alerts flooding her neural implant. We have 18 minutes to reach my ship. Kieran's face was illuminated by the pulsing red emergency lights. Can we make it? If we take the maintenance shaft to level 3, then cross through the research sector to the docking bays, she replied, already moving. Security will be concentrated on the primary evacuation routes. They ran through increasingly chaotic corridors, passing panicked staff who paid them little attention amid the emergency. Vexara's combat training proved invaluable as they encountered the occasional security drone or guard. She disabled them efficiently, using non-lethal methods whenever possible, a choice Kieran silently approved. At the entrance to the research sector, they encountered an unexpected obstacle, a sealed containment door. Radiation leak behind this barrier, Vexara explained, examining the control panel. The evacuation triggered safety protocols. Is there another way around? Not within our time constraint, she met his eyes directly. I can override it, but the radiation will affect us both. My physiology can withstand brief exposure. Yours. Kieran understood immediately. How bad? Non-lethal, but potentially damaging to your reproductive cells. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. The very genetic material that had made him valuable might be compromised by their escape. Vexara watched emotions cross his face, fear, anger, resignation, and finally, resolve. Do it, he said firmly. Freedom first, consequences later. Vexara hesitated. Kieran, this could mean. I know what it means, he interrupted. It's my choice. For the first time since my capture, it's actually my choice. The simplicity and power of his decision struck her deeply. She overrode the door and they rushed through the contaminated section, alarms blaring around them. Vexara positioned herself to shield him as much as possible, her scales absorbing some of the radiation. When they reached the other side, the docking bay was just ahead, along with a squad of elite security forces led by Director Nix himself. Impressive, Nix called out, his weapon trained on them. But ultimately futile. Surrender the human Vexara and you might yet survive. We both know that's not true, she replied calmly, assessing their options. Her ship was visible through the bay windows just 50 meters away. Nix's thin lips curved into a cruel smile. Your ship's launch codes have been locked, there's nowhere to go. Then we have nothing to lose, Vexara said, subtly shifting her position to shield Kieran. What happened next occurred with blinding speed. Vexara activated her combat augmentations, moving faster than the guards could track. She disabled 3 before they could fire, using their bodies as shields against the others. Kieran showed surprising combat prowess himself, seizing a fallen weapon and providing cover fire. In the chaos, they made it to the ship's airlock. Vexara slammed her palm against the recognition panel. Override Constellation Alpha, she commanded. The door opened immediately. Her true access codes had always been separate from the facility's systems. As they secured themselves inside, the station's final countdown echoed through the bay. Kieran strapped into the co-pilot's seat while Vexara's fingers flew across the controls. Bypassing dock clamps, she reported, initiating emergency launch protocol. The ship broke free just as the first major structural failures began consuming the station. They accelerated hard, the force pressing them into their seats as explosions bloomed behind them. In the sudden quiet of deep space, they finally had a moment to process what had happened. Vexara's scales had settled into a calm azure, her breathing steady despite the adrenaline equivalent still coursing through her system. What now? Kieran asked softly. Vexara turned to face him. We've committed to this path together, the radiation exposure, she hesitated. Our medical bay can assess the damage. And if it's significant, then we find another solution, she said with quiet determination. One that doesn't require sacrificing your autonomy or my principles. Kieran reached across the console, his fingers gently tracing the scales along her forearm. The intimate gesture sent ripples of color across her skin. I think solutions might be easier to find than either of us imagined, he said. As stars streaked past the viewports, Vexara made a decision. She set the ship to autopilot and unfastened her harness. Kieran watched her curious as she moved to stand before him. In my culture, she explained, her voice low and melodic, true connection begins with honesty. She extended her hands, palms up, a gesture of profound vulnerability among her people. I want you to know me, Kieran Walsh, not as your rescuer or as a mercenary, just as Vexara. Kieran rose from his seat, understanding the significance without explanation. He placed his hands in hers, their different anatomies finding perfect alignment. I'd like that, he whispered, as the ship carried them deeper into the stars, away from pursuit and toward an uncertain but shared future. 3 months later, the mining colony of Helios Drift didn't spare a second glance for the odd pair negotiating supplies in its crowded marketplace. A tall, scaled female with violet-blue coloration, and a human male who moved with the wariness of someone who had recently known captivity. The medical supplies are twice what they should cost, Vexara muttered, her translator off so only Kieran could understand her native language, which he had been learning with impressive speed. Welcome to Frontier Economics, he replied in the same tongue, his pronunciation improving daily. We can try the secondary market near the processing plants. They had spent these months in constant motion, staying ahead of pursuers while building a network of contacts sympathetic to their cause. Vexara's reputation in mercenary circles had opened some doors. Kieran's knowledge of human outposts had opened others. Their ship, now registered under a new designation, had become home, its confined quarters fostering an intimacy neither had anticipated. The medical scan after their escape had confirmed moderate radiation damage to Kieran's reproductive cells, not complete, but significant enough to complicate matters. Ironically, this setback had led to their most promising breakthrough. A xenobiologist in the Antares cluster had suggested an alternative approach, using Kieran's DNA patterns rather than his actual cells as a template for genetic reconstruction. The Council will eventually realize the same, Vexara had noted after that meeting. We're only buying time. Time is all we need, Kieran had replied with characteristic optimism. Enough to build allies, enough to present an alternative that benefits both species. Now, as they secured the last of their supplies and returned to the ship, Vexara reflected on how thoroughly her life had transformed. The mercenary code that had once defined her existence had been replaced by something more profound, a partnership based on mutual respect and growing affection. In the privacy of their ship, away from curious eyes, they had developed their own rituals and language of intimacy, one that bridged their biological differences. What had begun as tentative explorations had deepened into something neither had words for, a physical and emotional connection that transcended conventional understanding. As the ship's airlock sealed behind them, Kieran set down his load and turned to her. Without preamble, he pressed his forehead to hers, the greeting of her people, not his. I received a response from Dr. Myra, he said, referring to his former colleague who now directed Earth's Xenobiology Initiative. She's willing to meet. Vexara's scales rippled with cautious optimism, with official sanction. Unofficial, but with tacit approval, if we can demonstrate the mutual benefits. An alliance instead of theft, she finished. Their plan had evolved from simple escape to something far more ambitious, creating a framework for voluntary genetic exchange between humans and Vexara's people, one that respected sovereignty while addressing the extinction threat. We'll need to address the Council eventually, she said, moving to the navigation console. My former commander Esley has sent 3 messages this week alone. Offering amnesty and reinstatement. Vexara's head crest flattened skeptically. Desperation makes for convenient forgiveness. Kieran approached from behind, his arms encircling her waist in a gesture that had become familiar and essential. Do you regret it, any of it? She turned in his embrace, her scales shifting to the deep indigo that she displayed only with him, the color of absolute trust. I was hired to extract a treasure, she said, trailing a clawed finger gently along his jaw. Instead, I found something far more valuable. A diplomatic crisis, he suggested with a smile. A future, she corrected, pressing closer, one worth fighting for. Their kiss, an adaptation they had perfected through playful experimentation, sealed the sentiment. Physical love between them had required patience and creativity, but the rewards had proven worth every challenge. Later, as they prepared for departure, a priority communication arrived, from Commander Esley directly. They've tracked us, Vexara said, reading the encoded message. The Council has agreed to talks. No conditions, no demands, just dialogue. Kieran looked skeptical. Can we trust them? No, she answered honestly. But we've created enough uncertainty that they're willing to negotiate rather than risk losing access completely. The coordinates led to neutral territory, a scientific outpost in unclaimed space. As Vexara plotted the course, Kieran stood at the viewport watching the stars. Whatever happens, he said quietly, they can't undo what we've started. She joined him there, their reflections overlapping in the transparent aluminum. An alien mercenary and a human explorer, an improbable pair transformed by circumstance into something neither culture had language to describe. The extraction protocol failed, Vexara said with deliberate irony, but perhaps that failure will save my people in ways they never imagined. Kieran turned to face her, his expression serious. Not just your people, this could reshape relations between our species entirely. From captive and captor to partners, she agreed, perhaps even someday more than partners. The implications of that more hung between them, a question neither was ready to fully articulate but both increasingly considered. If their genetic compatibility research succeeded, it might open possibilities once thought biologically impossible. As the ship's engines engaged and stars blurred around them, Vexara allowed herself a moment of uncharacteristic hope. The mission to extract a treasure had failed spectacularly, and in that failure lay the seeds of something far more precious than mere genetic material. To new beginnings, Kieran said softly in her native language, the complex syllables flowing perfectly from his human lips. To choices freely made, Vexara replied in his, as they accelerated toward an uncertain but shared destiny, one where treasures weren't taken but freely given. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. 3.7 Sonnet.